Hello and welcome back to Level Up with Loraine. Today I'm going to be talking about the transformative experience of relocating to a different continent or country or region, whatever it may be for you, and the personal growth that comes with stepping far outside your comfort zone. So what we are going to cover is the decision to move, the things that you need to think about, adjusting to a new culture or way of life or way of doing, stepping out of your comfort zone and what that actually means, discovering a new version of yourself in this new place, and just practical advice for my listeners considering a big move of any kind. So grab a drink of your choice, sit back, relax, and get ready to level up with Loraine. Now, as a lot of my listeners, my regular listeners know, I always try and link a personal story to an episode topic, just to bring life to it and to be as authentic as possible and to add color to whatever it is that I'm trying to relate to you. So today, like I said, we are going to be talking about new horizons, moving to a new continent, and maybe even just redefining what your comfort zone is. For us, for me and my family, that meant moving continents in 2024 and taking the bold decision to leave our comfortable life, or what we believed was we were now comfortable with, set roots, and we could not imagine being anywhere else than in South Africa. And loved our jobs, loved the school that my daughter was at, loved where we had bought our house, and we were very comfortable. And then before we know it, there was an opportunity in front of us to move to a new continent, Southeast Asia, to be specific. And neither my husband nor I knew anything about this continent. But what we did know is that it would come with the growth and the opportunities that we had been praying for a long time. So we made the decision to move, but it didn't just happen overnight, right? It was basically prompted by three things that we needed to address. What is our why? What's triggering it? Do we believe in it? Is it a big enough push for us to move? The second thing was, what are our fears and doubts? And so before taking the leap, we definitely needed to address those fears and doubts. And then lastly, we needed to prepare financially, emotionally, and logistically, because you can imagine what a mammoth task it would be to move from Africa to Southeast Asia. So for us, what inspired the move was that it was a career move for my husband. His job decided to bring him to Bangkok, Thailand for 2+ years for a stretch assignment. Now, this is directly linked to what we had been manifesting and praying for, which was career growth, which was exposure. And in most multinational companies, you almost always have to do a stretch assignment outside of your continent or your comfort zone for at least 2 to 3 years before you are entrusted with a bigger role. And so that's what this opportunity was. Now, the funny thing is, you pray about these things, you manifest these things, and then when they do present themselves, it is scary as hell, right? And that's the funny thing about God. It doesn't usually show up the way you thought it would, but he shows up, and that's a whole episode on its own. But that's really what sort of prompted our move and inspired the decision to move. Now, I had obviously practical fears and doubts, and this is where I sort of want you to also really pay attention, because he came to the decision quicker than I did. It was more of a personal move for him. It was growth, etc. But what did that mean for my career? What did that mean for our daughter? What did that mean for our house? What did that mean for our family that we were leaving behind? And so these were real fears that I needed to address. There were real doubts that, that played in my mind and I struggled with. But you see, once you decide and you're leaning at least 80% towards a yes, you start to ask questions in a more positive light. What is the worst that could happen, right? How else can I do my job? What are the other schools in that region that mirror the kind of school that my daughter is at right now? It's less, will I find a job? Is there any school there? It's less negative. And so that reframing of your mind to be more positive is really where I needed to get to. Moving my feet towards a yes, and then actively working to make it work. Not ignoring my fears and doubts, really answering the questions that I had, but with a positive mindset. I hope that makes sense. So some of the things I actively started to do was to talk about it. I spoke about it with my moms. I spoke about it with my boss, and you will be surprised how much support is out there once you wear a positive mindset, once you start moving in a positive direction towards the goal, right? And as much as it is such an uncomfortable, or you're stepping out of your comfort zone, it's insane how, I hate saying the universe, but it's insane how everything just starts falling into place for you once you start moving towards that goal. And for us, it looked like this was God's plan, because things really did start falling into place. So an example of my fear and how it quickly, ceased being a fear would have been my job, and how I was really worried around how would I continue to work from Bangkok. And I kid you not, my boss, and I was ready to resign, but my boss came back and said, actually, let's try out for 6 to 12 months and have you work from Bangkok remotely. Work remotely with frequent travel. And, if I look back at my prayer points in 2022, 2023, it was always to have a flexibility, work flexibility, work-life balance. And I have a good friend of mine who's always saying real wealth is when you have flexibility and the ability to make money from anywhere in the world and be able to balance work and family and leisure and still get paid. And to be able to attain that in what I thought would have been me losing my job was really such a wow moment for me in my life, right? The other thing that happened was it also meant lots more travel. And that's something I prayed about. I wanted to see the world. And this meant that I would need to travel quite a bit more to be able to do my job and to meet clients and teams and all of that. So all this to say, your fears and your doubts could actually be catapulting you into a realm that you actually have been wanting and you've been manifesting. It may not look the way you thought it would. It may not come with a ribbon on top, a nice neatly tied ribbon. But if you just trust and are able to push yourself outside the boundaries of what you believe is your comfort zone, you'll be surprised what is ready to meet you on the other side. And obviously, the last thing we needed to think about before making the final yes to this decision was to prepare emotionally, financially, and logistically. So emotionally, really just, okay, we're doing this. And really we would talk about it. I mean, once we realized this was probably happening, we would talk about it daily. Financially, it meant, what are we going to do, right, with the house? What are we going to do? Are we going to put tenants? Are we going to sell some stuff? Are we sending some stuff to family? So it does take a lot of preparation, a lot of thinking, a lot of talking about it, leaning on your support system, writing down things, and being very honest about the decisions. What's going to be hard? How will you overcome the hard? What's going to need money? What's going to, lose you some money? What's going to need time? How much time do you have? And so you really need to get into project management mode for your life when it comes to such big decisions. So now that I've shared a practical example using myself, and we've spoken about the first part, which is the decision to move and the elements that go into the decision, the second thing would be adjusting to a new culture. Now, I also don't want you to think about this episode being for people who want to move continents or countries or regions only. It could be you moving into a new job, right? So you've been working in a well-established company and there's now this great opportunity for you to move and work for a startup. That's a huge leap outside of your comfort zone. There's a lot of uncertainty in startups. There's a lot of, unknowns, and yet there's also a lot of growth. That's an uncomfortable zone. And we want to talk about how do you adjust to such a new culture? How do you adjust to such new ways of working? It could be you leaving a relationship or leaving any place or in psychologically or physically where you felt comfortable. How do you make that leap and how do you adjust to the new? Okay. So when we look at adjusting to a new culture or way of life, we're talking about overcoming the culture shock, right? The funny, the awkward, or the meaningful experiences in between. And again, just continuing to use my own example, there were a lot of those funny, awkward, new things that I needed to get accustomed to, right? An example would be just how people greet and say goodbye in Thai. There's a lot of, bringing your hands together, bowing your head in sign of respect, and learning to do that and not just waving or nodding my head. I had to actually immerse myself in that culture and realize that I am now here and this is a sign of respect and this is how it's done, and start to practically do that, right? And so that's one thing that was, it was cool at first. And then I realized actually this is a way of life. When I say sawadee ka to someone, which is hello, or when I say kopung ka, which is thank you, I need to bring my hands together and bow my head. And the new place that you now find yourself in, and be able to make concessions for the ones that are important, and also be able to make a decision for the ones that you can actually live without changing, right? You need to adapt to the new norms, the language, the traditions. If it's a new job, it's how are things done. If you were coming from a big company where there was a lot of hierarchy and bureaucracy and all of that, and now you're in a startup world where things move fast, right? It's momentum over perfection and people are moving really fast. How do you acclimatize to that? And how do you do that quickly so that you can actually hit the ground running when it comes to doing your job and doing it well? And these are things you need to be aware of. And we prepared, by the way, for our move by watching a lot of YouTube videos. I watched YouTube a lot, right? From people who had lived there. I was on the phone a lot with a lot of Africans who are in Bangkok, or Europeans that I had been introduced to who have lived in Bangkok. And so I was prepared to an extent before we came. And lastly, as part of adjusting to this new culture, you have to build a support system and form connections and find a community. Now, this is one thing that we have done. I think we've done pretty well. I think that's who I am naturally. I do find that I make connections pretty easily, and it's not hard for me to network, to build rapport with people. And so we found that there's not many people who look like us in Bangkok, but there were already communities that had been formed either on WhatsApp or at my daughter's school, where other Africans were getting together, and other people who are either like-minded like us or who come from Africa and the Caribbean or look like us we found a community and we started to spend time and invest in that community, which meant weekends we would go to someone's house and have a bring and share, right? A potluck, or we would go for dinners with other couples. And so we intentionally made a plan to leave the house and build community. It's so important. Otherwise, you run the risk of feeling isolated in a new space, in a new place, which makes it very hard for you to then excel in that new environment. And so just to recap, in adjusting to a new culture, make sure that you research, right? There's a lot of things that you can do to find out about the new environment you're going into, whether it's a new continent or a new workplace. Just make sure that you research and you're prepared. There will be things that catch you off guard, and that's okay. Give yourself grace, but also be respectful enough to learn the way of the land, to learn the norms, to build community so that you can also just quickly acclimatize and socialize yourself to that place. So that's what I will share on adjusting. So just one thing I want to just share about stepping out of your comfort zone is unfamiliar environments push personal growth. And I have personally experienced this. I mean, one of the downsides of working remotely for an African company whilst I'm in Southeast Asia means my working hours are 2 to 10 p.m., right? So when I wake up and take my daughter to school, when I come back, my day would be empty until 2 p.m. And I actively started working out. So I started working out 3 times a week without fail. And it fueled me. It filled my day. And all of a sudden, I actually needed it to get my day going. I couldn't do without it. Previously, I have struggled with staying consistent with working out and being physical. However, this, for the past, 5-6 months that we've been here, I've been working out 3 times a week without fail. And for me, that is growth. Okay. Anyone who knows me knows that that is a personal win when it comes to physical well-being. So the good thing with stepping out of your comfort zone is it gets you thinking about new ways of doing things, the importance of investing in things like your mental well-being, your physical well-being. You actually need it. Otherwise, in the absence thereof, you could find yourself, experiencing feelings of loneliness, depression, etc. And so it has really helped me to experience happiness and to thrive and to feel well, right? To experience wellness. And that's the good thing about stepping out of your comfort zone. So no matter how unfamiliar an environment is, it does push or at least create opportunity for personal growth. The other thing is there've been lots of lessons learned about resilience, adaptability, and self-reliance. And there's a lot of things that I thought I couldn't do on my own. And now I can. And, a lot of resilience. It takes a lot of resilience to be able to be in a totally different continent, away from your support system, away from what you know and love, and to learn how to live in a new place. And so those lessons learned, it has strengthened my resilience, my mental fortitude, my self-reliance. I found that sometimes when I want to talk to my friends, they're sleeping, right? Or they're not available and we are sort of living past each other. We've also had to now actively think about good ways to keep in touch. And so my friends and I started to catch up every Wednesday. We send each other videos every Wednesday, talking about life and just catching up, right? And so that's adaptability. That's the ability to adapt in in the situation that you find, or the circumstance that you find yourself in, and tell yourself that this is not bad, right? There are other ways. Think out the box. There are other ways to keep my relationships alive, even though I'm millions of miles away from my loved ones. And the last thing here that I want to share would be the surprising benefits of being vulnerable in a new place, because it opens up for other people to be vulnerable. And I always say, for me, vulnerability and authenticity are amazing traits to have. It's always important to live life with those at the forefront. It allows people to approach you with the same, right? And it allows for authentic connections. And I must say, I feel like all the connections that we've had so far feel like divine connections, primarily because we've been quite vulnerable with the people that we've met, whether it's my nanny, the new nanny that we have, who is Burmese. And, it was funny when we are in a Buddhist community, and we managed to find a Christian nanny, right? Which was very important for me. And, that came from being vulnerable and talking to other people about what is important to me. Very early on into our relationship and into meeting them, I needed to bare my soul so that I'm able to have the right kind of connections. And so there's surprising benefits to being vulnerable. And if you lead with that, whether it's in the workplace, a new environment, and just being able to say, listen, this is what's important for me. I need it. It's a deal breaker. It allows for people to see the real you and be able to serve you or meet you at your point of need. So I hope that's helpful for you. The very last thing that I want to talk about is discovering a new version of yourself. The thing with moving out of your comfort zone is that you are forced to look at life, work, and relationships differently from how you used to when you were in your comfort zone. When I was at home and I was surrounded by my loved ones and I took things for granted, I had no time to, sit and think about life and work and relationships. I was just on the go, on the move, go, 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 go. And now that I am far from home, and of course I have my husband and my child with me, there's a lot more alone time to really, think and change and challenge my current perspectives on life, on work, on relationships. Where for me, work used to be, it's so important for me to be in the office. It's so important for me to, co-create with people side by side, looking at each other eyeball to eyeball. What's more important for me now is to add value from wherever I am in the world, whether we're sitting next to each other or whether I am on a Zoom call with you sitting in Bangkok. I need to be able to add value. And again, that's a change in perspective that has come because of my circumstance. The other thing with relationships I spoke about with my friends, I spoke to some of my friends 3 times a day, every day. And now I don't speak to them often, right? But what we have done is adapt and create new ways of keeping in touch with each other, because life goes on. They all have things going on, key milestones in their lives. And we are still checking in, and we're still, making sure that we're plugged in. But we found a new way of doing it, and we call it the Wednesday waffle. We saw it on TikTok, I think, and we quickly adapted it, and we now do the same thing, where we share videos every Wednesday, 3 to 5 minute videos about what's going on in your life, anything you want to share, etc. And so I've discovered a new version of myself, right? That I am resilient and I am adaptable. And one thing I am also very grateful for is I've never been closer to my husband and my child the way I have grown close to them the past 5 months, right? We are all we have, right? And so we just have this level of closeness, And I'm like, oh, these guys are so cool, right? And whereas in my in South Africa, I had other things to do. And so, yes, I love them and I live with them, but I wasn't forced to be with them all the time. And I had to be intentional about spending time with them. And now it's our way of life. We do everything together. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. So just to wrap up this episode, I think just some practical things, and I think I've spoken about them throughout the podcast. Research, research, research. Do not be scared of making a move. Lean on a support system. Ask questions. Be vulnerable about your fears and your doubts. But always operate from a positive mindset and think about some of the opportunities and the growth that is on the other side of whatever this move looks like for you. And stay open-minded, embrace change. And if you don't do it now, then when? Thank you so much for listening. I hope in 2025 you have the courage to embrace new horizons and redefine your new comfort zone, whatever that looks like for you. Until next time, take care and continue to level up.